sharing your story. Like I said, don't share anything you're not comfortable with. I just want y'all to know that weeks ago, on vacation, the very next y'all at Walmart me in all testimonies touch people. The thing when people oh, I I was totally not even expecting it, but no, the thing I was see that, and so tonight I'm y'all about I'm just gonna tell you some that I haven't read yet, and I've always struggled with being enough. Satan tries to make me think I'm enough, and for the longest time, if I was preaching, I see people and I just get so scared because I'd be like, be able to bring the word better than me. They would keep their knowledge. I would just get so nervous, especially if I hear that was really like a Bible scholar over here. So for the longest time, I felt like I was not enough. I think I was not enough. And sorry. And for the longest time, and I still sometimes struggle with that. Now I am a little bit older and a little bit wiser. But, I'm still human, and sometimes that still creeps back in, But then you have to remind the devil who I am in Christ. And I have to get my footing again. And I've always said, sometimes, God made me the way he made me, and he does not let me stay down. Like, I can be down in the dumps, down in the pits, and it's just like, I'm like, God, this is where I want to stay. And he'll be like, no, girl, you get up. So that's just, I still battle with feeling sometimes that I am not enough. But, God made me, and I am enough. I am good enough. And I'm good enough for whatever God calls me for. And so, and whatever it looks like, I don't have to measure up to anybody else. I don't have to measure up to Brother Don. I don't have to measure up to Sister Sandra. Sorry, Sister Sandra, I almost called her brother. I don't have to measure up to anybody else. I just have to measure up to God's standards and what he wants for me, and whatever that looks like. So tonight, I'm just going to open it up, and I want someone else to come share whatever it is that God has laid on your heart. Share how you become to know the Lord. Share your story, whatever it is that you want to share with us. Like I said, it's whatever you want to share. So who's going to be our first contestant? Kimberly. Sorry, Kim. I just sometimes call her Kimberly just because.
It's my legal name. It's okay.
Is her legal name.
I don't know. I wasn't necessarily going to talk about this, but with you just saying what you said and the struggles and stuff of like not feeling like you live up to, or you try to make yourself, or the enemy really, it compares you to other people. That's something that I've really struggled with. And last year, me and Sarah went through Trace Diaz around the same time as last April. And that experience honestly was not what I thought it was going to be. I hear everybody come back and they're on this emotional or spiritual high, and it just seems like the best time that they've ever had. And during it, the whole time I'm struggling internally, and it was a good experience, don't get me wrong, but starting out, I felt so out of place and so insecure in myself. Like, the enemy really fought me and beat me up that entire 3 days. And it was with stuff that I don't feel like people really think that I would struggle with. But I've known I've always struggled with it, and it's just confidence. And and being sure of myself. And I feel like to other people, I've had other people say this to me. I come across as a very like sure of myself, confident person. Like I talk way too much for somebody who's not very confident. I'll say that. But anyways, I just don't think people realize that is something I really struggle with a lot of times, is because I do compare myself to others. I do compare myself to the elders of the church sometimes. I mean, we're under great leadership here, and I've been around you guys for so long, and you're like family and stuff. It's hard not to compare yourself to that, but to let that become your entire identity is very faulty, and that's when the enemy sneaks in and does damage. So during the Trace Diaz 3 days and stuff, that was something I struggled with. I mean, I was surrounded by new people, trying to like make friends and stuff, and for not really the first time, but it just kind of felt like I felt like an outcast there. Not necessarily anybody's fault, but I just wasn't like sure of myself spiritually enough to go talk to people, like go out of my way to talk to people. And I basically, like, the enemy allowed I allowed myself to kind of isolate myself from people, and I didn't make as many connections there as I thought I was going to, and just like really beat myself down on it. And towards the end, it all worked out great, and God was able to really move in me through that experience, and I saw that I was struggling with that more than I really thought. And during one of the parts, I think most of us have been there, but during one of the parts of it, we were all sitting at the tables, and like it was just some of the gifts they put on the table and everything, but there were little rocks and stuff that was on the tables that had like a word on it. And this was like probably the third day. It was after I already realized, like, hey, this is something I'm struggling with. This is something like I need God to help me with. And it's one of those things, like, I just kind of felt like it was a silent battle that only I knew it was going on. Because, like I said, I feel like everybody thinks, oh, she's so confident. She's like, she doesn't struggle with any of that. But so it felt like it was my own silent little battle that I had to figure out on my own, when that's not true at all. That's just what the enemy wants you to think. But whenever we were sitting there 3 days in, I realized, like, hey, this is something that is really getting me down. This is something I need to work on. Whenever we got the rocks, and it was the one that I just happened to sit at, I flipped it over and read on it, and it said confidence, or confident, because it tells you, there's like the whole thing of like what you used to be and what you are now. And my rock was confident. And to me, that just like, it changed the whole perspective. Like, the reason, yes, I was letting the enemy tear me down during that, but I also, like, you know, it's like being purified by the fire. There's, like, you got to go through that struggle and that fire to get all the junk up to the top so he can get rid of it. So I don't know. I think, like, we're all dealing with our own silent battles that people just don't know. We don't know. Even though we love each other and we spend a lot of time together and we care for each other and stuff, we all have our own silent battles, and it's never something that we should be ashamed to feel or think we're alone in, because I bet there's so many things that we deal with that we all deal with. We just all, the enemy likes us all to think that we're silently suffering alone, and that's absolutely not true. So I don't know. I don't know if this helped anybody, but that's what it's up.
Just a quick question, and just be thinking about that. How many of us have struggled with not feeling enough? I know I have. You know, it is something that we all struggle with, not feeling worthy enough, not feeling like we measure up, not feeling like I'm good enough, and everything that I do is not enough. You know? So anyways, that was really good, Kim. Thank you. Is there anybody else tonight that would like to share? Sister Sarah, come on up. Aren't you not proud of these young ladies for stepping up? Yes.
Hello. Well, so something I'm going to share, actually we'll trace back to Trace Diaz, because me and Kim did go at the same time. So but before that, something had happened. So I guess I never told anyone how bad it got. Like, one day I was driving in Fort Smith. It was a busy time because it was during, Christmas. So it was pretty busy, constantly busy with people everywhere. And one day I was driving, and it was so bad. It was really busy, no big deal. But then suddenly, while I was in that traffic, I started feeling like I was having a panic attack. I don't know why. I'd driven in busy traffic before. In fact, I've driven near Tulsa or up to Branson, so it wasn't like it was anything different. But suddenly that day, it was super hard, and suddenly I felt like I was having a panic attack while driving, and that made it even worse because I am driving a car, and which I could crash, and that probably made it worse. Well, I managed to get home, but after that, suddenly driving wasn't so easy. I've been doing it since I was 16. I didn't particularly like driving, but I had never had any really anxiety about it. Suddenly I couldn't really drive anymore. And to be honest, some days it was struggle just to drive anywhere. Driving to work was horrible, and I hated going to work suddenly. I had always liked my job, but suddenly driving to work was I told my mom that I was having anxiety with it, but I never told her how bad it was because it felt like a struggle just every day going to and from work. And sometimes even just going to Walmart in Poteau from where I lived felt like a struggle because suddenly I felt like I was panicking. I was having a panic attack every time I got behind the wheel, and suddenly I couldn't go anywhere anymore by myself because I was just struggling for some reason. I didn't understand why I was suddenly having such bad anxiety over something so simple I had always done. But it felt really hard, and I felt like crying every single day getting behind the wheel, having to go to work, having to go do things. It's like I wanted to do those things, but suddenly it wasn't so easy. And so going on into Trace Diaz, I think it was very impactful, but also in some ways it was different in some ways than I felt it was for others. Because many people, and even while that we were there, had such big, impactful things happen to them. They had such big testimonies, had such big things happen. I didn't feel that way. I felt that I didn't really see anything big happen. And so it's like, sometimes I feel like that always holds me back because sometimes I don't experience it that way. I don't see big revelations or a big impact. And so that makes me nervous about sharing things because it's like, mine's not very big. It always feels like the things that happen to me when God shows his presence to me are very small. Like when Kim was talking about the gifts, when we got those rocks, my rock said strength. And to be honest, I didn't feel very strong at that moment. For a while, I felt like I was constantly going to break down crying. And one day I actually thought I was. I just sat there for a while, and I felt like I was going to just break down. But I didn't. And the next day, and then I can't remember if it was the same day, but that really touched me because it's like I didn't feel strong, but there it was. And then I can't remember what day it was, we got cups. And I got a cup. So they were all just little different kinds of cups. Some were coffee cups, some were cute little teacups. Mine was a little glass cup, and it had a memory verse on it. It was from 2 Timothy, which saying, "The Lord does not give us a spirit of fear." Yes, praise God. And I felt like, God, are you talking to me in these very small, subtle ways? Because you never talk to me in a big way. It's always in the small things that you talk to me. And even though, and that's why I always feel nervous about sharing, because I don't feel like you show me big things. But to be honest, I don't need the big things. I don't need a big testimony. I don't need a big revelation. I don't need a big sign, because you show me the things I need in the small things, in the small signs. And I don't need the big things. And that just, after that, things started changing. And even though I wouldn't say I felt such big revelations, after Trace Diaz, things started to change. And I started feeling better. Suddenly, driving to work was not a big deal, was starting to feel better. I was no longer having such bad anxiety driving to and from work. I could go places. And then one day I went to the pavilion because I decided I was going to drive there because I did not want to be afraid anymore. I did not want to have anxiety anymore. I decided that place is usually pretty busy, so I'm going to try and go during a time when it might not be as busy, and I want to go there. I'm going to stay there, going to maybe shop for an hour, and then I'm going to leave. And then I'm going to quote that second verse from 2 Timothy to myself as I drive. And so I went, I shopped for an hour, and then I got in my car, and actually I didn't leave right away. I sat there just saying it to myself over and over again, and then I left. And I don't know, and suddenly, while I still have my moments, I no longer have that anxiety. I am free of that fear. And I know that God helped me with that. And I just sometimes don't ever think about how God helps me. Because sometimes it feels like that I don't hear him. He's silent. But sometimes I think that's because I compare what I go through to others. Because in some ways, people have, those who really have gone through more than I have such big testimonies, and I feel like what I go through is kind of, not the same. Mine is just so silly because it's so silly having such an anxiety over something that's so simple, an everyday task. But I think that God, just the way he helps me in just the small things is what really matters to me.
I just love her so much. Not that I don't love everybody in here, but she does hold a little bit piece of my heart there. That was so good, Sarah. Does anybody else want to share with us tonight? Nobody else wants to share? Oh, Sister Amy, was you fidgeting in your chair? It is, but they can turn it off if you have something that you don't want to go on live stream. Brother Fred, can you turn it off for a little bit?